UK has become one of the most nature depleted countries on the entire planet, and since the 1970s we've lost 70% of mammals, birds, fish, reptiles and amphibians. That number is absolutely outrageous and something needs to change, and that's where reintroductions come into play. Here in the UK we have a variety of problems, but the one that is most talked about is the overpopulation of deer with no natural predator. Deer, when left unchecked, will overgraze the land and can stop trees from regenerating, as well as impact other animals like birds. In years gone by, this would have occurred less with the help of natural predators like lynx, wolves and bears, but here in the UK we have eliminated those animals, meaning the deer can do what they want. So throughout this video we're going to be exploring 7 animals that need to be reintroduced to the UK to increase our biodiversity. And the first animal we should talk about is the lynx, and it made news recently that 4 lynx were released into the Cairngorms National Park of Scotland in what is being described as an attempt at guerrilla rewilding, and it got the country talking about lynx. But ultimately, no, I do not think this was a guerrilla rewilding effort. I think this was simply someone abandoning their exotic pets. Like, when you think about it, this is a subarctic zone. It's extremely cold all the way through the year, but they picked the worst time of the year to do it. It was minus 15 in that area at that time, and it was carpeted in snow. 2 pairs of lynx were seen together looking super tame, and people were able to get super close to these animals before they were recaptured. And I feel like if this was a covert reintroduction in that area, which I think could be a really good area for them, I just don't think you're going to be seeing that. I think someone who was going to do it properly, they would do it in the summer, they would do it with an animal that had a fear of humans, and they could do it with an animal that had been bred for the wild. These things quite clearly weren't. But it got the country talking, and I think that is great. Lynx are a solitary, opportunistic predator that were once native to the UK around 1,000 years ago, before habitat loss and hunting pushed them to extinction here. They're a medium-sized wildcat and prefer to live in the woodlands. A feasibility study of the lynx has shown that the Highlands of Scotland can actually support up to 400 of them, and their favoured choice of food is the roe deer, of which the UK has an overpopulation of, and they will also target bigger deer like the red and the reindeer, but are known to eat foxes, rabbits, hare and other small mammals too. They'll keep deer moving though through what is known as the ecology of fear. Deer are less likely to stay in one spot if they know a predator is around. Now, if you're asking me, I think the lynx should already be back here, and I don't really see a massive problem with reintroducing them. The glaringly obvious one though is farmers and their sheep. Around the UK there are a lot of free-ranging sheep that are either like up mountains or in woodlands, on the edge of woodlands, sort of unaccounted for a long portion of the year, and these are places where lynx would like to be. I think that sort of stuff would have to be sort of checked back a little bit, and these sheep would have to be monitored a bit more, and maybe you could have guardian dogs with them. And in the grand scheme of things, I don't feel like that's a lot to put forward, you know? Like, okay, you might have to sort of reimburse someone if a lynx does kill a sheep, or let's say you have to sort of fund the guardian dog process, but I really don't think that's a massive outlay in the whole grand scheme of what's going on, you know? So anyway, I ran a poll to my YouTube audience, and the results actually were really quite interesting, and it was a lot more favourable than I thought it was going to be. So out of just nearly 800 people, 88% voted yes for a reintroduction of lynx, and I think that's a massive number. However, this was before the illegal dumping of lynx into the Cairngorms, so I thought, hang on, let's see if this has sort of changed public opinion a little bit. So I did the poll again afterwards, and this time over 1,000 people got in on it, and they voted 89% in favour of the lynx. And I think that little tiny nuance is quite interesting. A bigger pool of people, but they were way more keen on it. Or maybe not way more, but they were keen on it. So I would say this is definitely something that people want to happen here in the UK. But also from these polls, there were a few comments. I'm just going to read a couple of those out. I'm saying no, just because all it takes is for some idiot to get attacked, provoking one for them all to get called. Scotland as a stepping stone before introduced in areas like the Forest of Dean. Quite interesting. And then we have, definitely think there's room for lynx in the UK ecosystem. We don't really have an apex predator at the moment. We need something to keep the deer numbers down, and lynx pose minimal danger to people. It would be a win for the lynx and a win for us. Interesting comments there, and I think it weighs up a few different things. But do I think lynx are going to be reintroduced to the UK? Now, personally, I would absolutely love it. Of course I would. I think it would be absolutely amazing. I don't know why they're not here already. I don't get it. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we will see an official lynx reintroduction. Animal number 2 is the European bison. Now this one is a little more controversial because this bison was never actually a native to the UK. What was the steppe bison that went extinct in the UK around 10,000 years ago, and around the world about 5,000 years ago. European bison nearly joined them, but were miraculously saved after a dozen zoo animals contributed to the population of around 8,000 today. They, like beavers, are known as ecosystem engineers and massively benefit life around them. And I personally think they'd be a great addition to the woodlands across the UK. I think one of the considerations we'd need to take in is people's knowledge on these things as animals, because they're not just a cow. And I think a lot of people in the UK would just walk up to one thinking, oh look, that's a nice friendly cow, give it a pat on the head, and then they'd just get, you know, gored and that, just have a bit of that. Like, these things can be dangerous, and it's not something you want your dog to run into off lead, you know, because a lot of people in this country walk their dogs off lead and they go chasing deer and squirrels and all sorts. Imagine if one day that was a bison. That dog's not having a good time, is it? So I think in places where bison were to be, there'd need to be some strict rules, there'd need to be some strict policies and stuff to sort of keep people safe. Keep the bison safe, keep their dogs safe, everyone's safe. I think it could work. But again, I put this to my audience, and out of 1,400 votes, 82% of people were in favour of reintroducing bison to the UK. And this is how you guys, the audience, commented on this. I'm in favour of reintroductions and rewilding in general, but I'm not convinced the bison are the best fit right now. I do think lynx and beaver releases make more sense currently as two species that will either engineer lost ecosystems or predate rampant herbivores. And then we've got one from SEO Birder. It's quite long, but it says, no, the European bison was never native to the UK. Steppe bison went extinct 10,000 years ago. The fact that some environmentalists are thinking of reintroducing a relative of an animal that went extinct in the UK during the last ice age makes me question their actual intentions. There is more to that comment, but I think it's a really interesting point, and it's one that I wanted to talk about a little bit because I think there is room for this sort of thing. And I don't know if SEO Birders then going to question my intentions, but I've had this conversation with the Chinese water deer before. This is a non-native to the UK, but it's an animal that's not doing well in its home range. So we've introduced it here as like a game species to be shot at, and it was released to graze the land from Woburn and Whipstade, spread out east. And it's doing well, and the population survives on here all right. And I think there's something to be said about that, because the European bison at one point was down to the bare bones, and now it's recovering. And I think surely as a species and something that could fit into our landscape and environment, it would be beneficial for not only the landscape and environment but for the animal. I think there's something to be said about that. And then we have Koala Dude that says, I'm on the side of let's not reintroduce animals that have the easy ability to unalive us. So, do I think bison will be reintroduced to the UK? We're seeing it now, currently, in Kent with the Bleem project, and bison in an enclosed space. They are living wild within that enclosed space, but it is enclosed. Do I see it happening fully wild with no fences? Do you know what? I do. I really do. And I think for a lot of these animals in this video, it would be in Scotland, or maybe some sort of places in England and Wales, but it's probably going to be Scotland. And I can see it happening, I really do, and I think it would be a good thing, personally. A timescale on that, though, I'm not too sure, but I think it could happen in the future. Animal number 3 is the one that's been spoken about so many times here in the UK, and that's the Eurasian wolf. Fantastic animals that serve as a keystone species, but were wiped out from the UK around 300 years ago. They, like lynx, change the behaviour of deer and other prey species by keeping them moving so they can't overgraze. They cover a gigantic distance and will target prey animals like deer, boar, and even beavers. And these are my favourite animal, and I would absolutely love to have them back here in the UK. Now, everyone watching this video, I'm sure, will have seen the story about how wolves change rivers from the Yellowstone National Park and when wolves were reintroduced there. So I don't need to talk about that too much, but there are some obvious downside to wolves, and they will predate livestock. So farmers naturally don't like them, and as well, they have been known to kill people. Now, it hasn't happened in a very long time, but they have done it before. Whereas the lynx, for example, that's never happened. And they've sort of got this natural fear from humans as well. They seem to think that if wolves were in the country, they would go on a walk and just be annihilated by one. However, when you look at the statistics, you're more likely to be killed by a cow or even your dog than you are to even see a wolf. They're so elusive. But the distance they could cover as well here in the UK could also be a little bit of a problem. Like if you release them in Scotland, they could end up in North England within a week, and then they could be down in Wales a week later. You know, they will travel. Saying that though, wolves do live in countries smaller than the UK, smaller than even Scotland. I actually found a website that shows the wolf population by country from 2024. It was really interesting to read, but the Netherlands has 15 wolves apparently in it, and Netherlands, that is a small country. Switzerland has 150. Like, these are small countries and they've got wolves and they're doing all right. Like, there are plenty of countries smaller than England or Scotland or the UK as a thing, and wolves are thriving. And I think that's really interesting. So that aspect of it, I think, can just put to one side, because we have the space here. Again, it would probably be in the Highlands of Scotland, but we do have the space. But anyway, I did put this to my audience, and out of 1,000 votes, 76% were in favour of a wolf reintroduction. Here are the comments from that though. Absolutely not. They're too large and require too much ecological space that the UK simply doesn't have anymore. Yes, it's because of the red deer population causing less growth for forests. Yes, in almost every ecosystem where wolves are found, they are the apex predator and dominant species. But before they're there should be more large mammals for the wolves to prey upon. Interesting comments there. The wolves would be coming back to sort of combat red deer numbers, because the red deer numbers are too high. Fallow deer, red deer, roe deer, all of that sort of stuff, the numbers are too much, and I think wolves would primarily be going after them. So I'm not sure if we need more big animals for the wolves. I think we've already got them. But do I think wolves are going to be reintroduced to the UK? Short answer, yes, I do. I think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen soon. And I think we need to do the links first to then get people's mindsets changed. And then once that's happened and people go, do you know what, actually, links are all right. Wolves will be fine. I trust them now. And I genuinely think that's what it's going to take. But I don't see that happening for another like 10 or 20 years or something like that. But I tell you what, if that was in my lifetime, you best believe I'm going to be absolutely over the moon with it. Animal number 4 is a rogue one, but it was an animal that lived here naturally. It's the moose. Last seen in the UK around 2,000 years ago, they are the biggest deer species on the planet. They like a mixture of woodland and wetland areas where they're beneficial via seed dispersal, wallowing and trampling of the ground to keep the soil aerated. They are also prey to numerous animals on this list, including the previous animal, the wolf. So I feel like this is an animal that doesn't get talked about when reintroductions of animals to the UK are on the cards, but I think it's one that should be talked about, and I actually think there's a real possibility of it happening here. But here's something with the moose though: they can't really live for very long in temperatures that exceed 27 degrees. So you know what I'm going to say, places like the Cairngorms National Park, that subarctic zone, and further around the Highlands is probably prime habitat for them. But having said that, here's something really interesting. There is a site in Norfolk at the minute carrying out a feasibility study to see if they could put moose onto their land. Could you imagine that? Moose in Norfolk, that'd be amazing. So they eat a lot and they travel a lot, so they would occupy quite a lot of space. But then also comes the threat of them as an animal. Now, it is obviously a herbivore, but it's massive, it's colossal, they're aggressive, and it's a big, strong thing. And you know what, like, they're dangerous. There's no other way to put it. They are dangerous. However, saying that, in Europe they're doing really well, and reintroductions into Poland have been a great success. So I put this to my audience in the poll, and out of just under 900 votes, 76% were in favour of the moose, and I think that's really interesting. However, let's read some of the comments. It's a cool idea, but realistically, where is there a continuous expanse of the right kind of habitat for them? My instinct is always yes, but do we have enough room for all those creatures now? Dangerous, no thanks. So I think generally the public is going to be thinking, flipping heck, I don't want a moose, that's scary. But I do actually think there is the right sort of habitat and land for them here, and the expanse of it as well. The Cairngorms National Park, again, is one of those places, and I think the wetter areas of the UK, Norfolk, is also another place which honestly really it could do with some moose. Like it could house them. But do I think moose will be reintroduced? Look, I'm up for it, you know. I think it would be really good. And do you know what? I think this could happen sooner than you think. Similar to sort of like the Bleem project with bison, I think that could happen with moose, but without fences. I think there's something on the cards here, you know. Animal number 5 is weirdly a predator of the moose, and that is the wolverine. Wolverines have been known to kill moose and were native here in the UK around 8,000 years ago. These are basically the honey badgers of Europe, and they're a mean customer, but most of the time they'll be seen scavenging. But don't get it twisted, the wolverine can turn super predator when it needs to. So this one I've never heard talked about for reintroduction to the UK, but you know what? I think he's got a chance. In a warming world, these guys are at serious risk. So once again, you are going to be having to look up to the subarctic zone of Scotland, the Cairngorms, that sort of area, because they need the cold and they need snow in particular. And there's not many areas around the UK that has snow all year round. And even the Cairngorms doesn't have snow all year round, but it has it quite a lot. They also need predators around, and that's obviously a bit of a problem because we don't really have many of those, because these things are predominantly scavengers. So we haven't got lynx, we haven't got wolves, but if they were here, wolverines would obviously do the business. They don't really like humans, and honestly, they're rarely seen, even in places where you expect to see one. It's a super rare thing to see. They don't like human contact. However, having said that, they could be a bit of a problem to chickens and sheep if they ever came into contact with them. But when it comes to us, we're fine. A wolverine has never killed a human being. But could there be a possibility that if you do release them into the Cairngorms, for example, could the possibility arise where capercaillie and the now reintroduced Scottish wildcat are in trouble with that sort of stuff? And yeah, they could be, but like, I don't think it would be just like Wolverine just thinking, hang on a minute, I'm going to smash them Scottish wildcat. But if it came to a bit of a battle, they're probably going to lose, right? The Wolverines is bigger, it's stronger, it's more ferocious, it will win those fights. And if it's in the same area, chances are they could come face to face. Like, those are two really precious animals to the UK right now. Capercaillie is literally on its last legs. The Scottish wildcat is being reintroduced, and that's all very sensitive. So I can't imagine Wolverines being put into those areas are going to make those sort of sets of people very happy. But again, I think there's something to also be said about preserving a species, and along with the things I've mentioned, I think just having them here to grow their own population out again, I think is a good thing. However, once again, I asked my audience, and just over 700 votes this time brought a 67% yes to reintroducing the Wolverines. And here are what some of the comments said. Emma says, I did not know Wolverines were in the UK. Christian says, I don't know, as the environment has changed so much since they've been gone. I suppose they could feed on deer, but they're opportunists, so will feed on small mammals and birds too, so could pose a threat to some of our rare species if not kept in check by larger predators. And you know what? I think I do agree with Christian somewhat. I think there is some sort of scope to be like, hang on a minute, could they actually be here properly? Like, feasibility studies I don't think have been carried out for this, and I don't think anyone's talking about it, but could it be a possibility? I think it could, but we do need to sort of like research that and do a bit more on that. But the interesting one for me was Emma. Emma says, I didn't think Wolverines were here, and I genuinely think a lot of people in the UK would also have that same mindset and wouldn't know that we had Wolverines here like a few thousand years ago. But yeah, we did. But the question is, could we reintroduce them to the UK? Again, look, I would like it to happen. Do I think it's going to happen though? Probably not anytime soon. It would really surprise me, to be fair, if one day something just happened and they were like, do you know what, we're going to chuck some Wolverines back. It would really surprise me. There's been no conversation about it. I've not heard anyone talk about it. So I think it would be an interesting one personally, but I don't see it happening. Animal number 6 now, and it's the European pond turtle, an animal that was once seen around the UK around 8,000 years ago, but this time they died out naturally. Unlike every other animal on this list, this one dropped off due to a cooler climate. The way they benefit their ecosystems though is by hoovering up the dead stuff in water, which in turn helps to clean waterways and potentially minimize the spread of disease. They're omnivorous and known as an umbrella species, which means if they are preserved, other animals benefit from this. And to be honest, I think it all sounds pretty good really. I don't see too many downsides to having them back here. Although, saying that, they died out naturally, and that's different for a lot of the animals we've got on this list. These things went away on their own accord. So should we be playing God by bringing them back? Because I think there is something to be said about righting wrongs of the past. Like, if we eliminated something and we have the chance to bring them back, I think that's all right. But if these went naturally, should we be tampering and putting them back when nature took its course? I do like the idea of them being back here though, like a native turtle. We do have terrapins, red-eared sliders, yellow belly sliders already here. They're doing all right, What about if we put the native one back? And do you know what? Steps are actually in place to make this happen, which is really quite interesting. So I asked my audience, and just over 800 votes, and 84% of people said yes, bring them back. And I think that was really strong. I wasn't expecting that, but you know what? I quite like the idea. So let's read some of the comments on this. And Richie Rich says, if any animals are no longer in this country, then they should remain no longer. It's that simple. He goes on to say a few more things. And do you know what? Like, I do get that. And I somewhat agree. And I think if nature has taken its course, I think we should probably leave it at that. And I do get that one. I believe that any and every living creature needs to be brought back to where it belongs, but also there has to be the same food resources they once had, like the plants and animals it consumed. Don't bring back one without the rest. And do you know what? I think they've pretty much got the same stuff here, so that's quite interesting, to be fair. Do I think they'll be reintroduced? Do you know what? I think this is the strongest potential on this list. Apart from maybe the lynx, I think this one right here has got the strongest potential, and it's already in motion. I wouldn't be surprised to see this decade freshwater turtles, the European pond turtle, being reintroduced back to the UK. I wouldn't be surprised. The final animal on this list is going to be the brown bear. A once native to the UK around 1,000 years ago, along with habitat loss, they, like others, were hunted to extinction. They are large omnivores weighing up to 600 kilograms and super oppressive animals with the ability to run really fast and expertly climb trees. They eat a wide variety of food like berries, seeds and grasses, and they're also top predators. They can take down large deer like moose and will also catch and eat salmon. They're a keystone species and do wonderful things for the environment. Think of all of the animals on this list and stick their benefits together. That is essentially what a bear is. But the biggest problem when it comes to bears is they are absolutely terrifying. They are, aren't they? They're scary. Like, could you imagine if one just sort of appeared from behind me? I'm losing that fight. I'd give it the odd left, right, good night. I wouldn't win. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's killing me, and I've got a lot of weight on me, so it'd have a good feast. But also, that scenario isn't like too stupid to think about in like Canada or the USA, because bears will sort of investigate human areas. There are videos online of bears just like banging their way into people's houses, going into people's swimming pools, all of this sort of stuff. They don't mind being around humans. That's a problem. Like, that's in places where people sort of like, they're brought up to know about bears. This country just is not. Do you know what I mean? Could you imagine the general public if a bear was on the loose? Oh my God, it would be utter carnage. And we're just not equipped. We are not equipped for that as a nation. There are so many different things, but this country in particular becomes very offended if they can't walk their dogs off lead, for example. Could you imagine off lead in a bear area? It's not going to happen, is it? But like, ecosystem wise and environmental wise, bears are an amazing thing. They do pretty much everything. They're great. It's just not going to happen, is it? And look, if I'm being honest, it's not going to happen now, and it's probably not going to happen ever. You'd have to get the lynx, you'd have to get the wolves, you'd have to do moose, you have to get all of these animals back first before we go bears then? Because they're just too big, they're too scary, and they would just absolutely mash us up. Like, could you imagine like a chav deciding to go to the Cairngorms for one time, and then he comes across a bear? You know what I mean? It's not going to end well, is it? For the bear. But anyway, I put this to my audience, and out of 1,000 votes, 55% of people said they'd like them to come back. Look, I think that's wishful thinking, I really do. But there is nuance to obviously these results. My audience is a wildlife conscious sort of group of people, right? They're not the general public, so it's skewed a little bit, but I think there's something to see in the nuance. The ones that have got a real strong reputation of coming back, like, yes, reintroduce them, I think that's like a sure thing. More than anything. But this one here, 55% for an audience that thinks of wildlife in a good way, is probably showing you that it's not going to happen, is it? But anyway, here are the comments for that. We have Scott saying, yes, reintroduce them in town centres, liven things up a bit. Scott, I totally agree. No bloody way, I would never eat a Twix in the forests again. And then we have, yeah, it would be a good reason to tell your boss you cannot come to work because you have a bear in the garden. I like it. That's positive thinking. And then finally, do I think bears will be reintroduced to the UK? No, I don't. Not anytime soon. Probably not this century, if I'm being totally honest. And maybe not ever. I cannot for the life of me see it happen in this country. I don't think wants them. I don't think we'll even entertain the idea. And I think that's quite sad to say, but I just don't see it happening, because around Europe, there are bears. and people can live side by side with bears. But this country, having no bears currently, I don't think will want a bear back here. So no, I don't think bears is going to happen. But out of this list, I think there is a lot of talking points there, and I think there's a lot of stuff that you could make arguments for and against. But ultimately, I think out of the 7 that I've picked there and gone through, I think a lot of them have the chance to come back to the UK, and some of them a lot sooner than you might think. And honestly, like, having traveled to Scotland multiple times, and like the Cairngorms, and just being in that environment, I think the Cairngorms especially could be, or Scotland in general, could be such like a truly rewilded nation. It has such promise of being like just this paradise land for wildlife and nature, and I would love to see that sort of pushed more in the future. I for one hold out hope that a lot of these animals on this list will make a return into the UK, and I don't know, hopefully we'll see it in the next few years or 10 years, whatever it may be. But I think it would be really, really cool and really, really interesting. And if you've got any thoughts and opinions, or if you'd like to see some of these animals back, or maybe an animal that I haven't mentioned, then please let me know in the comment section down below. I'm going to leave this video here. Thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, take care.